President Biden slammed Russian President Vladimir Putin in a dramatic address to the United Nations General Assembly today, accusing Putin of making, quote, overt nuclear threats, violating the core tenets of the UN Charter, and seeking to wipe Ukraine off the map.
This war is about extinguishing Ukraine's right to exist as a state, plain and simple, and Ukraine's right to exist as a people. Whoever you are, wherever you live, whatever you believe, that should make your blood run cold.
Well, the president's speech comes just hours after Vladimir Putin, in a rare address to the Russian people, announced he was ordering a mobilization of military reservists to help fight in Ukraine. And he suggested that he is willing to use nuclear weapons to defend Russia. Joining me now for more is ABC News White House correspondent MaryAlice Parks in Washington and foreign correspondent Tom Soufi Burridge live in Kharkiv, Ukraine. So, MaryAlice, first to you, there's a big speech for the president, always coming to the world community at the United Nations. And in this moment, he really wanted to talk about Ukraine. What are your biggest takeaways from his speech today?
Yeah, well, Terry, first on nuclear weapons, like you said, the president just blasted President Putin and Russia for what he said were overt nuclear threats against Europe and reckless disregard of responsibilities of a non-proliferation regime. And then he went on later in the speech to talk about the United States nuclear program, obviously the nuclear superpower in the world, so everyone listens when they talk about nuclear weapons. And he said that does not matter what else is going on in the world. It just does not matter. The United States is always ready to engage in conversations around nuclear non-proliferation, any kind of arms control measures. The United States wants to engage with other nuclear powers about that, wants to be de-escalating any conversation around nuclear weapons or nuclear war. And then the other big takeaway, obviously, was just all the other times that he made a point of really, in absolute and unwavering terms, blasting and rebuking Russia. And not only Russia's actions essentially in Ukraine, the war they started in Ukraine, but taking a step back and saying that those actions, that war in Ukraine, means that Russia has really violated its role and its position on this body. You heard the president say that he believes that Russia has violated the core tenets of the UN Charter and really calling into question their role as a member of the Security Council.
It was definitely dramatic accusations. Tom, I want to listen for a moment to Vladimir Putin's speech. Some of those remarks, his latest nuclear threats, came in this rare address to the Russian people today. Here's some of what he had to say.
To those who allow themselves such statements regarding Russia, I want to remind you that our country also has various means of destruction, and for separate components and more modern than those of NATO countries. And when the territorial integrity of our country is threatened, to protect Russia and our people, we will certainly use all the means at our disposal. This is not a bluff.
Tom, this is not a bluff. That can be taken two ways, obviously. Either he's not bluffing, or like a lot of bluffers, what he says is, I'm not bluffing. But that is a dangerous game to play with nuclear weapons. I want to ask what his speech, the mobilization, and the claim that if Russian territory is attacked, Russia will respond. What does this mean for Ukrainians, for those Ukrainians under Russian occupation right now, not far from where you are?
Well, Terry, I think, look, you've got to bear in mind that Vladimir Putin is talking from a position of weakness. He's increasingly isolated around the world. The leaders of India, Turkey, China have expressed disquiet about the war in Ukraine. His forces are losing on the battlefield, particularly in this region up in the northeast. And so Vladimir Putin today really was kind of trying to respond. And, you know, one of his sort of kind of game plans right now is to say that all of that occupied territory in the south and the east of Ukraine, well, we're going to hold these referendums. You know, in the eyes of the West, they're a complete sham. They won't be free and fair, those votes. But we're basically going to say to you that after those votes, after that process, that land, we will consider that to be part of Russia. And what he's trying to do really is try and redraw the red lines, if you like, in this conflict and say to the West, if you support Ukraine attacking those territories, you're effectively supporting an attack on Russia itself. Now, I don't think, you know, policymakers in Washington, Brussels and London are suddenly going to change course overnight because of this. They know that, generally speaking, Ukraine is winning this war right now. but it will give them food for thought. They will have to bear this in mind. They know that Vladimir Putin, as he gets more and more isolated, more and more weak, he becomes more and more dangerous potentially too.
And as part of his response to this moment, Tom, President Putin ordered a mobilization of the country's reservists, about 300,000 of them. But really, there's no end to what the Russian government can do now. This is essentially making the Russian people join the fight. Ordinary families with their sons and daughters going into the military. How significant is that on the battlefield and for Russia?
It's absolutely huge, Terry. And let me just talk you through a bit of the optics. Late last night, we thought Putin was going to give this address to the nation. And really, all the signs were that he was going to go for a much fuller draft. Then the speech was postponed, and he spoke this morning and came up with this partial draft saying that basically only people with military experience will be drafted in. Apparently about 300,000 more troops bringing into the war here in Ukraine. But really, it's such a big decision that late last night we saw that flights out of Russia suddenly booked up. Searches on the internet for how to avoid the draft went up exponentially. There's clearly huge concern within the Russian population. He risks turning the war, really turning public opinion massively against the war by going for the draft. You only have to go back through history and think about, the Vietnam War in the US's case of how much the draft became unpopular. It's a huge decision. It will massively also impact the Russian economy. So it's a massively high-stakes game for Vladimir Putin right now.
Shows how desperate he is. Tom Soufi Burridge, MaryAlice Parks, thanks very much for that.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.